We got a voicemail. Can we play that?
Hey guys, this is Craig up in the mountains outside Seattle. I called you before, still drinking the Jameson Caskmates Stout. Try it if you haven't yet. Anyway, so I'm pretty heavily weighted toward value in my overall portfolio, very high risk tolerance, mostly small cap value, but my second largest exposure is large cap value. And right now, all of that is in VTV across my Roth IRAs and my brokerage account. Looking at where I can increase exposure to large cap value and diversify away from just VTV. And so I'm looking at Invesco's RPV. I'm looking at Spider's large cap value fund, SPYV, I believe, and then looking at Vanguard's VONV and VYM. VYM is their high dividend yield large cap value, and VONV is their pretty vanilla one. 98% of VTV is already in VONV, so I would be doubling up there, which is fine. There's a reason I'm in VTV. But really looking at what factors you would recommend I look at more than others. Is it total amount of assets? Is it PE? Is it the amount of overlap I have? And just wondering how to evaluate it and make the right decision. All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Craig. Just FYI, we have a new office in Seattle.
We sure do.
So maybe you can stop by with some Jameson. You can have a shot.
We're going to have to go up there just for that.
Yeah. All right. So he is just loading up and he's asking for advice on what fund to pick, which we don't necessarily do, but maybe we can give him some guidance. He's in a large cap value mutual fund or ETF, and he's also in some small cap. So he's looking for more exposure to large cap value.
Yeah.
And so he names a bunch of different funds and was looking at, how do I get more exposure to the same asset class that I'm already in? And I'm already in basically an exchange traded fund that maybe covers all of the large cap value funds. So now you have to basically look at how the fund is structured, I think.
Yeah, well, right. And I mean, if I take a step back, I would say small cap value historically has been the highest performing asset class. If you look back 100 years, but you may have a decade or two of underperformance. So are you really willing to risk that based upon, we don't know about your age and your investment horizon and that sort of thing. It's why we generally recommend a globally diversified portfolio.
Yeah, but he's not asking that.
I know, but
you're giving advice or your unsolicited advice. We're not here, right? He's asking, what should he do if he's looking for another value fund?
I'm suggesting that's not the right approach.
Oh,
however, answering that question,
okay.
I can tell you what we look at. We look at the size of the fund, because we don't necessarily want to, and the age of the fund. We don't necessarily want a brand new fund with not a lot of assets, because it makes it harder to trade and get fair pricing, number one. Number two is we look at the expense ratio inside the fund itself. And then number three, obviously, is you look at the investment strategy. And if the investment strategy is the same as what you already have, then what's the point of getting another fund?
Right. I think that's the point. VTV, pull that up, Andy. So, but one of the things, I guess, our value funds that we use with our clients is probably different than what he's doing, through Vanguard or through Invesco, because you want to look at this is a market cap weighted fund. And so you can look at price and earnings ratio, which he asked, or we look at book to market ratios to define value. And so and really what that means is that a company has a book value, like just if you look at their assets and liabilities minus their liabilities and everything else that they have. And then there's a stock price. So you have the book value of the company versus the actual price. So book to market. And it usually in a value fund or value stock is that the book value is worth more than the actual price of the stock, because by definition, value companies are like in potentially distressed or they're out of favor for some reason. And they're more risky. And over time, you achieve a higher expected rate of return because you're taking on that risk. So if you're in a market cap weighted ETF, and really what that means is that the most exposure you're going to have is the largest funds, right? So the really big value type funds, or let's see, what is that? I can't, what's 3% of
Berkshire
is this the fund?
Hathaway? Yep. Johnson & Johnson, United Health, JP Morgan.
So like Berkshire, 3% of this overall fund. So then you look at, okay, well, is there, and if it's market weighted, so Berkshire is a pretty big company, right?
Sure.
But the bigger the company, the safer the company, right? So you probably want to look at, all right, well, do I want to do a market weighted, or do I want to do pro rata rated? I mean, there's different ways on how they structure the overall ETF. That could give you maybe a little bit of juice, but I mean, I think it's a redundant strategy. If you're going to look at this ETF that's large cap value versus another one that's large cap value, in most cases, you're investing in all those stocks. You know, I mean, there's just going to be a ton of overlap.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think to me personally, if you're going for high octane, I still would do more diversification, and I would load up a bit on emerging markets, because those are foreign companies in emerging countries. Those tend to have an even higher expected return over time. Although, I mean, the last decade, neither one of these asset classes has done that well. So does that mean the next decade they'll outperform? Maybe, maybe not. That's why we don't necessarily recommend loading up on just one or two asset classes, because you may, like the last decade, large company growth has been the best in the US, has been the best performing asset class. And if you were small value and that's all you had, you missed a decade of growth.
Yeah, but large growth is now just getting crushed. You know, the big companies are just getting hammered.
Yes, they are.
Right. And then so it's so hard to predict.
Yeah.
Right. So I like the fact that you're buying, you know, broad-based index funds that are low cost, but it's not like you don't need 6 large cap value funds. You need one.
Right. I agree with that.
It's just going to be a ton of overlap, and you're not going to get any diversification there. So if you want small value, large value, that's great. But then, like Big Al said, now we're giving advice is that you probably should broaden it out. But with all these fund choices, they're all fine. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with any of them. You just want to, if you want to get more like in the weeds with this stuff, you just want to look at how that fund is structured. And you can look at book to market ratios. You can look at, price to earnings ratios. And, I'm sure there's 1,000 other ratios that you can look at, but there's going to be small, subtle differences there.
Are you prepared for retirement? Schedule a free financial assessment with an experienced financial professional right online at purefinancial.com.